Hello and welcome to Movie Phone. For Blockbuster Shrinks, press 1. Blockbuster Shrinks is playing now.
All right, we're back at it again. Another podcast from the Redhead Family Therapy Guy.
And a mic.
And we're doing it. We're talking about a good one. Dude, this movie is so classic and so good for its time. I mean, I don't think 1993 could have had a better movie than Jurassic Park.
Yeah, growing up, I really loved dinosaurs. And I think it kind of started with Land Before Time.
Yes.
I think that's what kind of pieked my interest. And then
that movie
really
made me cry, right? Did that movie make me cry?
Yes.
There's a sad.
Probably 2 or 3 times, but
yeah.
Yes, it is. But that's probably what I feel like that, at least that's my earliest memory of being really excited to learn more about dinosaurs.
And they did just such a convincing job. I mean, it's so grand.
Yeah.
It's so visually amazing. The setup with, the dinosaur eating a person, which you don't see.
Even the visual effects of Jurassic Park in 1993.
Yeah. Well, even now
felt real.
Now.
Like it
even now.
Yeah, I was thinking that the other when we were watching. I was like, "Oh yeah,
yeah." I was like, "That Triceratops looks
pretty."
Great.
Oh well, that.
I was like,
when
that
they have the
animatronic
amazing stuff, it's really good.
Well, and I thought to myself as I was watching, I was like, "How did they do that T-Rex chasing the Jeep?" I'm like, "That looks great." I'm like, even now in '93, I'm like, it looks amazing.
I bet some of it's not CG. I bet they had.
It looks amazing.
Animatronic. Something for
T-Rex,
for part of it, or I think I actually remember reading like it was so heavy they had. I think I've read or seen something on that.
Yeah,
but yeah, I remember so I was 10 when this came out. Which, if you can do the math, you can figure out.
I'm way older than you, bro. I was like a junior in high school.
I was 10, and I remember. My parents coming home and being like, we saw a movie and the dinosaurs they look real in this. And I remember thinking, because I love dinosaurs so much, I was like, oh my goodness, I have to see it. And they're like, okay. And so they take me to see it as a 10-year-old in the theater. And I remember we went to, I think it was Century,
the bloody
16 theater.
Leg of the goat.
I think off like Lamb in Vegas, but I can't quite remember. But we went to the theater and there were lines everywhere. Like everyone wanted. And back then, right, you have to go, you buy your ticket and then you get in line as far at the front as possible so you can get the best seat, because there's no reserve seating.
Hopefully you don't end up in the front row.
And hopefully you don't have like a big person right in front of you, right? Because there's not stadium seating. Like there's no stadium, there's no recliners.
I'm so glad they solved that problem. I'm so glad that's never an issue.
The miracle of cinema.
and now you get that. It's so funny too. Nick and I were traveling and we decided to go to the movies, and we went to a movie, and she's like, "These seats don't recline."
Isn't it crazy? Like how
why don't these seats recline? She's like, I'm like, well, it's stadium seating. She's like, but it's bouncy. She's like, I can't get my feet up.
Well, remember, they were just normal chairs, not most of the time, not so comfortable. And then literally you'd have maybe an inch. I've always been fairly tall. They were like so my knees would always go to the chair in front of me. And so anytime anyone wanted to come, you'd have to stand. Like it was really hard to not. So theaters have changed.
Now you can just walk in front of somebody and they don't even have to get up. Their
amazing.
Recliner can be open
and you still can get it's a beautiful thing.
It's a
reserving your seat and then having reclining seats that are stadium is truly amazing.
It's one of the great blessings of the 2022.
So I remember going and standing in this line. So this is really the best first memory I have of a movie. I know I saw other movies in theaters, but this one has always stood out.
Top Gun was mine.
Was that yours? And so I remember we go and we're standing in line. The only thing I remember is the opening scene, being petrified as a 10-year-old. Like, what pants. The freak did I get myself into?
Shoot her!
This is so scary.
His like body just goes.
Yeah, it goes up and like an elevator, right? He's like, where?
Yeah.
but you don't
It's
see
so
anything,
terrifying.
which
No,
makes it
it's terrifying. It's
scarier,
so great. It's
right?
just lights, like lights in the
Yes.
thing. It's like,
I
I think you see,
love
do you
that
get an eye? Do
opening.
you get an eye maybe?
I
Is
think
there
at
an
one point you
eye?
get an eye. Maybe it's at
You
the
get
end
the
of it or
raptor
something.
eye.
But I
Yeah.
love
Which is
that
such a
opening because
great
they use
setup.
this box, right? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, it's such a great setup because then you have like the sale of the, nerdy or Nedry meeting Dodson, and then it skips over to the dig where you have the two scientists, I'm forgetting their names, and the philanthropist shows up, and that whole scene is such a great setup to the
Yeah. Are they
movie.
paleontologists? Is that
Yeah,
what
yeah,
what
yeah, yeah,
dinosaur?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
So, well, and
so
she's a paleontologist of like of fauna, of biolife versus animals. But that whole scene is such a great setup because they're talking, they like set the tone of like that whole paleontologist, like the exotic, like in the field thing. And then the philanthropist shows up and he's this like, guy. He's got the accent. He is so good in that role
oh
of
yeah.
like being that caricature of, the guy with the money that's trying to put on this, he's got this vision of what he's trying to do.
Fantastical.
Yeah.
Well, I keep
Yeah.
using that fantastic thing. I don't know why I keep
Yeah.
saying
And so
fantastical.
all of that is just like the setup for this movie is so good. And it sets up for that scene
Yeah.
where they're driving in the Jeeps across the open land and they do that scene with all the life. It's so, and he like
Well, and I love
gets up and then grabs her head. Like that's one of the best movie moments. Like it's just a beautiful setup.
wait, which one?
The movie moment where they've then like on the helicopter and they've been talking with Jeff Goldblum. Like Jeff Goldblum is so
Oh yeah, he
good
does it
in this.
great. He does
He's so good. And like they're in the helicopter and there's some of the thing, and then the music is so great. And it just builds to this moment
It
where they
does.
reveal the dinosaurs.
Yes.
Like they do the setup for the dinosaurs.
Yeah, it's very like
so
epic
well.
and grand, right?
Yeah, it's just the
That
great.
they
So
lead
everything
up
about the
to.
story and the little vignettes that set the ground
Yes.
of danger.
So
And
that's
like
I want to address that
Park
real
and
quick because I love that. So you obviously it's like a velociraptor, right? In this
yeah.
cage that we don't see. We don't see
Mhm.
the dinosaur in there in the beginning. Then I always was petrified by the part where I can't remember his name, but the main
The
paleontologist.
paleontologist.
Yeah.
His name is Grant.
Where there's this kid, right? Which at the time would have been older than I was seeing the movie, that was kind of
Yeah.
like being a
That's
knucklehead,
and that's
right?
the volunteer boy. That's
The
his name.
volunteer boy. So the volunteer boy being a knucklehead and saying this, and then he uses the velociraptor claw and just like slashes at him. I love those foreshadowing moments,
Oh, it's
right?
so
that
good.
build to
Yeah.
this.
It's like you're like,
even
oh, we're gonna watch somebody get eaten
Yeah.
alive in this movie. Yeah, it's a
even
great
with
foreshadowing.
the scientist in the tour, right? When they stop the what would you call that, motion ride, I guess. It
Oh, that's
wasn't
one of
really
the best. That's one
motion-ish.
of the best lines in the whole movie, where he's like, "Are these is that real people or are they autoerotica?" And
Yeah.
he's all like, "You mean automatronic or auto whatever the
The
appropriate word is?"
lawyer, all the people they picked did such good
Great,
jobs in
just
their
perfect
roles.
caricatures. Yeah, and Jeff
Yes.
Goldblum he's so good. I just love the way he's so good.
Well, and I was just cracking up. My cousin Heidi is here and we were watching it, and she's like, don't you love how after he gets his leg hurt, he's just like posing like a model with his shirt wide open, where he's laying down, and it looks like a cover of a romance novel. And I just kind of started laughing so hard. I was like, it's so Jeff Goldblum, right?
It's so good. It's so good. I just the way he delivers, and he's got such.
Oh, he has such good
He's
quips.
so
Like his lines are perfect.
He's so charismatic, and he's so interesting and fascinating. I also really loved. I guess I noticed more the tension with Grant and Ellie. Is that her name? Laura Dern. And like the whole thing around kids not having kids.
Sure.
And Grant, of course, warming up and being the protectorate of the two little kids as things unfold. I really noticed that tension around protectiveness and family, and I love how she is like kind of laughing on the side, how the boy is like idolizing him, and the girl is kind of enthralled with him, and he's like annoyed and doesn't want to be around the little monsters or whatever. It's just all of that playfulness.
I agree. I love
cool.
that growth that we see with him, particularly right throughout this movie, where he's trying to get rid of the boy. Right. Yeah. He's literally trying to get rid of him to the point
Which
where
car are you going to be in?
Yeah. Or whichever one you're in.
And then he like walks him back to the opens the door, the kid gets in, he shuts it, and then goes in the car. It's so great. It's so awful. And it's just so well played. You know what I mean? It's just, but then, and I was thinking too, like when I was watching the movie and the scene where the two kids are being attacked in the truck, and Grant, gets out there and he waves the thing, but I'm like, hey man, it's taking you a little while to do that, man. Like this T-Rex is making lunch meat of this car. You should already be out there waving that thing around. You waited a little long, in my opinion. But of course, this movie magic to
make it more
terror
intense.
And anxiety. Yeah, because
and even that scene in particular. Oh man, it always drove me nuts because the T-Rex looked like it was going back into the habitat, right? And then Jeff Goldblum gets out, and starts waving his, and I'm like,
he's all like, throw it and stand still. It's like, dude, like Grant had already solved the problem, and Jeff Goldblum.
But we had to get the lawyer eaten, right? The lawyer had to be
that was the whole point. That's right. That's a good purpose. That's absolutely right.
on the toilet, which is very.
There's so many wonderful metaphors of hating lawyers that represent insurance companies and all of the bureaucracies and difficulties that all their worth is taking a dump, and they should be ate. Is really the clear message there. There was definitely archetypal messages of how Hollywood feels about.
I feel like there's a lot of stuff, like the whole thing with Jeff Goldblum with this idea of, chaos theory, right?
It's so good. Power versus control, chaos versus order. And there was like another theme: power controls chaos and order. Oh, and just this notion of man and nature. There's an which is through all the movies.
I think it's Jeff Goldblum even narrates those lines of God creates dinosaurs. What was it? I didn't.
It was like down. God creates dinosaurs. God kills dinosaurs. God creates man. Man creates dinosaurs. Dinosaurs kill man.
I think she says,
and then she's like,
dinosaurs kills man, and women inherit the earth, or something. Or does he say it, and then she says women inherit?
I don't remember exactly where the line break was, but she's like, women inherit the earth.
And then I think she just gets out and walks out. Right?
It's a great setup.
When I kind of had this idea, I love kind of this idea of control and where control ends up getting, right? Control turns in this complete chaos. And I love that idea. And I think about that in our own lives. Like, how often does trying to control everything just create more chaos? And it's like that, right? It's that instinctual, it's that trauma, it's that anxiety, it's that fear that drives the need to control. But it just creates more chaos. It's so
and a lot of times it's well intentioned, right? Because you don't want people to be hurt. You're trying to protect somebody from danger. You're trying to protect your sense of self. The view.
It's out of love, even sometimes, right? Like especially with our kiddos, it's like I don't want them to be hurt, so I want to control everything. But it creates, in the long run, especially, it creates so much chaos.
It makes them weak. It also sets them up to be weak, to not manage the chaos that they need to understand and know how to manage to live a
and in those moments, right, it's out of love, but it's also out of, and this is why I try to talk to parents a lot about, is when we're doing something, are we doing it because it's for that child or that person's growth and what they need, or to try to calm the emotion, the fire within,
the worry, the distress.
So that control seems like, probably in that moment in our mind, it seems like this is what's best for that person
thing,
but really it's just trying to calm our fear, our fire within.
And it's tough because some of that is good. I mean, that instinct of parents.
We do have an amygdala for a reason, right?
Yeah,
We
exactly.
have that fight or flight, that limbic system for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also it gets us into trouble probably more often than it
I think
helps us.
this is one of my theories. This is one of my theories why we're seeing so much emotional so much mental illness
or yeah, like dysregulation.
De-escalation. I think because our physiological limbic system that has worked wonderfully well to protect us and to keep us around and surviving an incredibly dangerous and dynamic planet, we've gotten to a place where social order is such that our limbic system not only is reacting in ways that it's not quite prepared for because it's changed so quickly, but also there are forces, economic forces, or companies and media understand how to hack into and to manipulate or to use power to get you to respond in certain ways so that they get an outcome, whether it's the fear mongering so we all jump on top of a policy, like what happened after 9/11, company. I mean, we know that companies,
and that's with anything. It doesn't even have to be a big event, right? It can be some little thing that happens, and it's like,
or even just our cell phone. But we know that this is a fact because if it wasn't a fact, Budweiser wouldn't spend millions of dollars for 30 seconds.
And I think the point being that what we see here, right, is that there are ways to utilize our biology, right? Ways to utilize our biology and
to push and
heighten certain things. Yeah. But we do that in our own lives.
Oh, sure.
Right. We and this creates unhealthy, like this creates
chaos,
right?
You learn how to do that from a child, right? Yeah. I mean, from the child perspective, our 5-year-old, is learning how to use her distress signals to get what she wants.
Yeah.
Which isn't
because we adapt and create defense mechanisms, not realizing in the long run, those defense mechanisms are not going to be as healthy for us as coping mechanisms. Right. And so, and there's a difference, right, between a defense mechanism and a coping mechanism. A coping mechanism would be breathing, right? Doing breathing daily and trying to regulate. A defense mechanism
and ground
would be controlling, right? Trying to control everything. That's a defense mechanism. It's something we learn to do to survive.
Yeah.
Did you say grounding?
Yeah.
Like a grounding. When
you said
tool,
breathing,
right?
when you said breathing, I said grounding. So you're in the here now versus the past or the future.
Exactly.
So with Hammond, is that his name? The philanthropist guy.
One more thing I think that with this is so interesting is that if we were in Jurassic Park, our limbic system and our amygdala would thrive.
Yeah, dude.
It would serve its purpose to the T. Yes. But the thing we have to realize, and it goes back to the sentiment we've shared in the past, which is perceived fear versus real perceived danger versus real danger. We don't live in Jurassic Park.
Yeah, we don't live in a world where physical harm, in America anyway, where physical harm is a danger in a day-to-day way.
There are parts of the world where definitely, even in America, if you're in an abuse situation,
school shootings happen and rage happens and convenience store robberies happen.
99% of my day,
99.9% of our day
is not going to be in a life or death situation.
Correct. Right.
And I think that's generally typical for a good portion of the population of the world.
And so we have this physiological system that's meant to keep us safe from bodily harm. And we live in a civilized world where it's more subtle and nuanced. And
so then it goes to seeing survival as something else, right? It's an emotional survival instead of a physical survival. And that's where perceived danger becomes real.
Words are violence, Michael.
Yes.
Words are violence.
Well,
no, like words hurt your feelings and can be awful and can be traumatic, but they're not violence. I'm sorry. I don't agree with that.
And here's the thing though, for us, especially in this day and age, they become real.
Yeah.
right? It's real to us. So we're not saying it's not
because
real
we
to you.
don't.
It's
Well,
real
because
to us because we don't like it's perceived danger though.
right,
And there's a difference.
It's different because we don't have the context of physical harm. Like if you live in an
Sure.
environment of physical threat, and then you move to an environment where people are verbally threatening you and verbally assaulting you, you'd be like, whatever. Like, yeah, you can say mean things to me as long as you're not throwing a knife at my face. Say whatever you want.
So the idea here is how do we gain balance, right? So that we can live in this world where we hear things or experience things and from our perspective, but we're not in a constant state of fear, right? We're not in a constant state of danger.
Well, it's really hard. It's like I said, I think it's really hard because you have, an economic system that
thrives off of it.
Yeah, that's pushing your buttons because they want you to have a fear response so that you'll buy their product.
Well, and we still need to be in the world, right? You still, I mean, you can limit to a degree, but going the extreme is still not the answer, right? Extremes rarely are I don't know if they're ever the answer, to be honest, but that's where we have to find that balance. And I think that's such an interesting part of this movie is this idea that control ultimately brings chaos, but he's blind to it. Isn't he? Is it Hammond? Is that who? Yeah, he's blind to this. And that's such a beautiful part of the movie is how often are we blind to our control creating chaos? I just love that idea.
So what's really interesting about Hammond and the ice cream scene is, do you think what did you get? I don't know if I was struggling with my capabilities because I was tired and watching this late. What did you receive, or what do you see as Hammond's motivation to create Jurassic Park? Because he's not trying to be rich, right? He's already rich.
So I don't think it's money because he doesn't seem to ever care about. And
he talks about the flea circus thing, which as a kid and even now I think is just really bizarre. Like the whole flea circus thing and people coming and watching it and imagining.
Yeah.
I don't know if I get what he's talking about there and his drive to create. I get the drive to create Jurassic Park, to create essentially the moment that we enjoy with Grant and Ellie when they're driving across the plain and they see the dinosaurs. Like that whole moment, they do such a great job of creating the moment of what would it be like if dinosaurs were real? Like how unbelievably amazing would that be to see these creatures alive?
But then you have the flip side where he creates dinosaurs that are extremely dangerous. And that drives fear more than enjoyment for most people, right?
Well, but he gets a little bit of a thrill out of that, right? Like, because there's this scene somewhere in there where the raptors are, I think it's where they're seeing the raptors in the cage, but we don't see them. And they're talking about who I love also, Muldoon, is that how you say it? Bob Peck is the actor who's he's the game warden.
Oh yeah, he's awesome.
And he's talking about how smart they are because they don't know, and they're learning the truths about what these creatures are actually like because now they're alive and they're acting.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere in there he's talking about how dangerous they are, and they do this shot of Hammond and he's got this sinister kind of I don't remember that. Yeah, it's very deliberate. It's very deliberate. And I don't think it's like he's this guy that wants to bring mayhem into the world, but it's almost like that's part of the thrill. Like, ooh, we have these really scary, it's somewhere in all there. Or
whatever it is that he's experiencing, to me, from my point of view, it's blinding him to what everyone else is seeing.
So my question is, what is it that's driving that? What need or characteristic is driving that he's willing to be blindfolded? Because I think another example,
what I don't know.
I think another example of his blindness is the fact that he would have Nedry, who's clearly this, the software engineer genius, but is a total, you wouldn't trust that guy. You would not put $100 million or $1 billion system in the hands of some guy that's got Twinkie wrappers all around the table and it's a total mess. Like, you wouldn't, like, that's chaotic. Like, clearly that's chaotic. And you're going to put him in charge of putting together your whole system of,
or at least
operation.
He's the only person in the know.
Yeah, maybe
right?
Maybe he's have, your programmer, but you've got somebody else that's or at in least, charge of this guy, or something people, like that. Right? Like, I mean, that's just not a right. But he's blinded system. To that. Yeah. Right? Exactly. So he's blinded to that. So what do you think is driving Hammond, and the part that makes him blind or willing? Like, what is it? Is a need to?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because at the dinner, remember at the dinner table where everyone's giving their reasons why this probably isn't a good idea before the chaos, right, ensues, and he's just shocked by that.
He's shocked that everybody is resistant to it, except for the blood-sucking lawyer.
Yeah,
he's like,
so I don't know. That's kind of what I was thinking about when I was watching. Is like, what is his motivation? What drives him? Especially to have his kids be there in the testing phase.
Yeah,
like that. Even as a maybe not when I was 10 when I saw this for the first time, but as a young teenager watching this movie over and over, I always thought,
would you put your
dude, why would you put your grandkids there? Like, that's crazy. Does he care about them? Like, I don't get it.
So yeah, what is that need that would do that? Is it the need to be the guy that's showing you something that's out of this world? And then, like, is it like a Trump,
you get like
narcissistic
a mix,
ego?
Right? Yeah, you get a mix. Like, at some points, it's like he just wants to create a special experience for people that you wouldn't like. No, you can't get that experience anywhere else.
Yeah,
right?
That's what's so exciting about it, right? Like, that's the bump. The bump is look at how incredible I am that I was able to create this experience for you.
You get a little bit of that. But I feel like there's also this kind of like you're talking about, like this sinister side, maybe this narcissistic side, right? Where he's
because like,
why would you
make raptors until
that's what I don't understand is why would you make
unless you're just like committed to creating the complete ecosystem. You know what I mean? Like, well, raptors need to be there because that's a part of the ecosystem for it to function.
Completionist.
But if that's true, it's not true because Ellie's like, well, you have fauna here that's also extinct, and you've got it in the wrong places. Like, it's poisonous.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You've got it in the garden.
So I wonder if they have that in there just to make the point that he doesn't have the bad they're not bad. They're just hunters. He doesn't have the hunter dinosaurs to be a completionist, because he's not really focused on making it correct. He's focused on making an experience that,
and so maybe it's just about exciting
notoriety. Maybe
it's dangerous. It's intriguing.
I think one,
because who wouldn't want to see that?
It's cool. I think that's one part, but I think there is something there where he's being driven by this idea that I've created something. It's kind of like that, what Jeff Goldblum was talking about in the beginning. Like, he's kind of saying to him, like, you're trying to be a god here.
Yeah, maybe that is that he got possessed by, because she even says that, I think, at the ice cream, I got possessed by this idea, but like, and I think Goldblum's point is so interesting, whether you believe in God or not. He's like, nature selected them to not be here anymore. Like, and you are taking on this power that you don't understand and that you can't control, and you can't create a complete system, because we have a complete system on this ecosystem of Earth, and the dinosaurs are gone. So, you're introducing something that's going to it can't do anything but create chaos, because it's a closed system that exists in the balance that it exists, and you're trying to add something to it it's not going to work, right?
I love that. Something that's really cool with me about Jeff Goldblum in this movie is he has great one-liners.
Oh gosh,
like, he plays his character perfectly, but then when he talks about what he does, he really drives in some points. Like when they get off the ride and they're with the eggs, he makes a couple of great points. And then at the dinner table, he makes great point too.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I love kind of what you're saying.
Well, and he just leaves it out there too. He's just like,
he does. He's like, hey,
like I've just introduced the idea. Like, it's self-evident that chaos is going to ensue because you've just put something in the system that's not there. So the system has to regulate it, and that's going to create a chaotic cause and effect in this system, right? It's such a beautiful thing, and it's something.
I think that's what's really interesting to me about this movie is they're trying to say, hey, when you try to take on a godlike, persona or whatever, when you're trying to control, then chaos ensues. And I love that because they're talking like a big level here, like, right? Like not everyone has billions of dollars to do a park like this or the research or the ability, but on a micro level, how often do we take on the role? I love that idea of it's really just a really, for me, a picture of, hey, when you're trying to control everything, is that really going to help you in the long run, or is it going to make things worse?
Or you introduce something into a system and think you can control what's going to happen.
Well, how often does that happen with our kids?
Yeah, right. Like you have another kid.
You need here, use this, or here, do this, or do it this way.
Here's a cell phone. Here's a car. Here's a cell phone. Here's a car. Here's
not that cell phones or cars are bad.
No. It's just you're introducing something into the system, and you think you're going to control how they use that thing, and it's like, no, you're not.
Yeah,
like, no, you're not. Like, you're not going to, because it's an instrument of freedom, and it's a chaotic instrument. You're not going to control what your kid looks at on a phone. Like, you can even put every block known to man on there, and there's kids and ways around it, and they're going to figure it out.
Unless you give them just a phone, right, that just calls.
Some of them will figure out. We have
even with a phone that just calls.
No, dude. Even a flip phone,
numbers you could still call.
No, there's still stuff you can get on those old flip phones. I'm telling you, just from experience, that people will find a way to see things that you hope or want, or
Well, to have internet ability. I mean, you can get. But I'm pretty sure you can still get phones that don't have internet.
There are a couple that they charge you a ton of money that are like as basic analog as
what
you
is
get,
it? Yeah, it's like the kid ones.
Yeah. There's a couple out there. Anyway, so I mean that it's really beautifully articulated.
Yeah.
That notion and that strain. And you know what it made me think of? It made me think of how the emerging technology of AI is like the dinosaurs, because I just saw an article the other day that somebody got fired from Google because he was raising a red flag and saying, hey, we've got AI that's already sentient, and he talked about it, and Google fired him for, I don't know if it's because he leaked the information or
have you read the Bobaverse books?
No.
So I like this idea, like the sci-fi idea of AI, which it sounds like you're saying is maybe not so sci-fi anymore, but
I don't know. I have no idea. I've heard
this guy, right?
I've heard other software engineers. I've heard other software engineers that say we're super far away, and they talk about why. Jordan Peters talked about why it's far away, but it's. The problem is,
or even the Amazon show Upload, if you've seen that, where they,
I don't know if I've seen
basically take you and put you, like when you are ready to die, they can take you and put you into
your consciousness.
And that's kind of the Bobaverse books are kind of like that. Also really interesting. It's a really, how did we get down AI track?
I brought it up because while watching the movie, because while watching the movie, I thought to myself, dinosaurs being introduced into this closed ecosystem and the chaos that ensued is like unto us humans creating AI into a system and hoping it's going to do these things or letting it do these things.
We already know that Skynet is eventually going to try to kill us all and take over the world.
Exactly.
So it's only a matter of
the
time.
Foreshadowing has been outlined. And so it's
before
it's a
it
really
happens.
interesting comparison, right?
It is. It's a great comparison.
Well, this is one of the other lines. I think Goldblum says it. It's like you were in such a hurry to see if you could create dinosaurs.
That's a
you
great
never asked
line.
yourself if you should. And I wonder if the same kind of thing is happening with AI. It's like, well, we want to write this software to do these things because we want these outcomes, but it's like, well, but should we? Like, is that really a good idea?
Also, I love the play, like to expand on what you're saying. I love the play on cloning also within the movie, right? There's this subtle
and
play
the
on
sense
cloning,
of controlling how many there
wasn't
are.
it back in the 90s when like they cloned the sheep or whatever? Remember that?
Ears, ear. I remember the ear on the rat.
They clone, and so it's really interesting, this idea on
you haven't seen
should we be doing that?
And you haven't seen the most recent Jurassic Park movie.
I have not.
Oh, so the cloning issue.
No, don't spoil it.
Yeah,
don't spoil it.
There's a whole. It's kind of a treaty on.
Oh man, it's really. So I think that's an interesting part too. It's like this god-like thing going on where we're controlling things and then and creating things that maybe shouldn't be here, and then also should we be cloning? And I love how at the beginning when they're explaining how they're doing it, they clone Hammond right in the video, which obviously is fake, right? They're just doing it in the video, not in the movie itself, right? They're not cloning Hammond in the movie. But all right, everyone, we are back. We had to take a quick break. None of you probably even realized it, but we took back. So I don't remember.
So I was introducing the idea of how this movie symbolically brought up this whole idea of AI and chaos and the chaos that could ensue, and the whole idea of control. And are people thinking about what it's going to mean if AI becomes a thing, or what it means that we're turning over so much power, right? Like, I mean, just the idea of the self-driving car, right? Like you're putting your sense of safety in a technology that's like, I mean, because driving is this, I mean, that's an intense, activity with lots of danger, high speeds, turning, other cars. And I trust that the technology is, doing really well. I haven't been in a Tesla. I don't know what the experience is like.
Well, and that's kind of part of the premise of like this upload show. There's AI driving, and that's part of what kind of causes an issue. But then that's also happening. That Will Smith movie, remember that?
Yeah, iRobot.
iRobot. Thank you.
That movie.
Yeah, I always think of that when I think about like AI driving.
Well, and they
how
build
he always
off
wanted to drive himself.
and they build off the Isaac Asimov metaphor or rules, that the AI was written, or the code was written with these three rules, so it would never become a danger to humans, but it absolutely does because of the three rules.
Yes.
Which is a really fascinating kind of conundrum or whatever.
It is. And even, I mean, you see more and more of this to where, it does affect, and it has for years, right? And that's just part of adjusting and transitioning. But you see less employees in places, right? Doing certain tasks where robots are doing them. And so that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just takes adjustment, and people have to maybe gain a skill set somewhere else to be employed.
Yeah,
but it's really interesting how we've had this growth really for a while now, and these changes, which I think a lot of us aren't even really aware of, except for in that moment when we go to a store and we're like, oh, look at this cool feature where I can check myself out using my phone. Yeah, well, right?
Even just a few years ago, I mean, I think just even from like when we graduated from high school to when you could order a sandwich by touch button, like all the things you want. Like, I know they really perfected this in the Northeast at Wawa's, which is a convenience store, where it's like, and Wawa subs are like the best. Like, they're great. And there's Wawa's everywhere. Some of them are gas stations. Some of them are just little convenience stores.
We are open for sponsors, Wawa.
Yes, and
just
they
if you're interested.
perfected the sub because you can walk in, you can pick the bread, you can pick the meat, you can pick extra, you can pick every single thing. And I
Yeah.
mean, they put that thing together quick and it's just how you want it. Oh, it's making me hungry for a sub. I haven't had a Northeast Philly like hoagie or sub in so long. Subway just doesn't do it. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Subway
It's a
just
bit of
doesn't
a
do it.
drive too.
Yeah, well, it's just anyway, it's the roll's not right at Subway. Subway rolls are good, but the Northeast sub has Italian sub roll that's made in the Northeast, Amoroso rolls that they use on cheesesteaks and subs. And everybody in the Philadelphia area, that's when you go to a sub place, you're getting Amoroso rolls, and it makes the
Yeah.
sub.
Growing up, I mean, we did Subway sometimes. We had Porta subs in Vegas, and I really liked their sourdough bread at Porta subs. And then we had a little bit later on Capriati's, which is kind of all over. I think it's in
So
California and Nevada. But
did we nail down what we think Hammond's driving thing was that blinded? Like, because what is it
we
that
mentioned kind of
what is
thoughts.
it that
I don't know if I
what is
really
it
know.
that he says, or like Goldblum or Grant jumps in the car at the end when they're making their escape off the island, and they say something like,
Well, one of them says, "I
"I
do
don't
not,
approve your island," and then
support."
Hammond's like, "Yeah, I get it," or what is he? What's his
I don't remember what he
response?
says. I think it's Grant, the paleontologist, says, Hammond, or just to let you know, I'm not gonna endorse
The
the
island.
park. And then I don't know if
Do you
Hammond
know what
says
his
anything.
response was, or
I don't
it's like
remember.
he's that his arc is that he has become convinced because 5 or 10 or the however many people die
So for
that he
those
shouldn't do it.
who listen to us, we do have a Facebook page and we do have an Instagram. I would be curious
And
as
TikTok.
to and a TikTok. That's right. I would be curious to know what your thoughts are about Hammond because I'm not
What is his
sure. I mean,
arc?
I think there's a lot of different things that come to mind, but also you can tell us if he does say something because I don't remember him saying
Yeah, I
anything
don't know.
besides
He
okay
responds
or
with
whatever.
something. Yeah, he responds with something. So it's almost like his arc is that he's come to terms
He does
with
seem
that he
humbled to
doesn't.
me, which makes me think it's more of like a power play, right? It's like I want to be noticed, I want to be recognized, like some of that narcissist
Well, that's the whole thing with like the flea
tendency.
circus thing. I thought like I just don't get the whole like he's like I had this circus and it was fleas and everybody would look and be like, oh, it's so incredible what they're doing, and I'm like, wait, what is it? Like maybe there's something I
Well, the
don't
dinosaurs would be the
understand.
flea, right? They would
Yeah,
be the
yeah. But
attraction or
right, but I guess I don't understand what the drive would be to be like the circus master. Like maybe that's a thing. Maybe that's a thing I just don't because I don't have that need. I don't have the need to be the person that's the one that conducts the symphony.
I think
Maybe
he just
there's a
has the
personality type or
ability to
something.
do it, was kind of always my impression. He just has the ability to create it. I think more so to me is because fleas, like when you have a flea circus, they're just fleas. There's not, I don't think there's different types of fleas you put in a flea circus. I think it's just
Well, that
fleas.
whole scenario is just
But
like
then
weird.
he
I'm like,
goes
wait,
above
what?
and beyond that, right? Yeah,
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't
Like
know
I
what
don't
the
even
point
get
of
I
that
don't even get
is.
the metaphor. I'm like, why would I want to like what are you talking about? I
I
don't want
think
to
he's just
like I
saying,
don't
I want to create something that people
people
want
are
to see.
enthralled
Yeah.
with. That isn't imaginary.
Yeah. But then he
Because
goes
it's like,
beyond that, right? He goes beyond that because he could have done that without creating the Velociraptor or the T Rex. Like
right,
he could do that just by creating what I mean, he could have done that just by creating one dinosaur
right,
and people would have been enthralled and been like,
yeah,
oh my goodness, I have to go see this. Like I
right,
have to.
right.
And yet he had to create this whole thing and kind of to your point or to her point, he's creating and doing things that aren't even correct, like he's just putting things together without doing it the right way, which kind of drives another
Again,
question. That's where
to
I'm
like
not
look
sure what
good.
was that about. Yeah, what's going on there that drives him? And then to go a step further, put his grandchildren in danger just to get the park passed in the testing phases. Like there's no way I would ever have my family test a park like that. I don't care if it were
Yeah,
tested
or
and I
wait,
was
or wait. here, let's shut off the system while my kids are out in the park
crazy
to reset it, because so we can get back online, while we're running around with like the fences will be down,
and it's like after they're trying to like do all this stuff, eventually, he's like, hey, will you go get my grandchildren?
Yeah,
like it's almost not, like after I like it, just something
like why
seems
not
off.
If, like, for instance, if you own a park of dinosaurs and there are ones that can eat humans, like why would you not have a fail-safe container for the monstrous eaters that even if the system went down, they couldn't eat anyone?
Yeah, and why wouldn't you be able to reboot the power at the command station? Why is it across the park? Or across the wherever they're at the facility?
Samuel Jackson needs to be 8.
Yeah, he has to die, I guess.
He has to die,
which is also a fun thing. I forgot Samuel Jackson's in the movie.
It was like his breakout.
Like everything.
I don't know if this was before Pulp Fiction. This was before Pulp Fiction, so I think this is one of his breakouts.
Sure,
because he was in everything after this. I mean, he was in everything.
Oh man, yeah. I don't know. I honestly, I would be curious to hear what people think. I have a lot of thoughts that go through my mind. I think there could be some narcissism. I think it becomes about control. The interesting thing with us is when we start to get into controlling behaviors, it can become very consuming to where when I have people come into me, it's hard to break them of that, because it feels like the answer to them. It feels like the only way out. It feels like the only
so
option.
Intuitive. It's really incredible how intuitive and how one of the things I've been surprised as a therapist over the years is when there is an individual that is really struggling with control, how hard it is to help them see how much.
And that's why I feel like it's because for him too, right?
Well, we
for
have
him,
all
and
of
he's blind
illusions.
to it until these horrific things happen, and then at the end, he's like, "Okay,
oh yeah, I don't have control." Yeah,
I cut you off.
It's hard. No, it's okay. It's hard not to, because there are these illusions of control. I turn the lights on and they come on, and I start my car and it starts, and we do all of these things that create this affirmation that we are in control.
Yes.
But it's just an illusion. I mean, it is an illusion. Like the only control we have is the decisions that we make to do with our body and say and think the things that we do. Once it's not us choosing to do something, and especially when the other entities or objects or people can make choices for themselves. I mean, that's the thing that's really terrifying with AI.
Yeah, and
once AI can make choices, there's not anything we can do anymore.
Yeah, and I think
it becomes a thing in the universe that we can't. The
real interesting thing with control, with our, like when we're trying to control, or when we're working with clients that are trying to control, the interesting thing is when you are trying to control, you are losing control.
Yes,
you are doing the complete opposite.
Yes, you are becoming disempowered, which is also another reason why your anxiety goes up and your fear goes up, because you subconsciously know, oh, I can't control this, and so you try to override
you
that.
Try to control it. It doesn't work, right?
No, and so people will escalate.
It's something I talk about with people all the time. Is we have, and I think this is the same with control. It's the same with fear. We as human beings love fear. Like we fear letting go of fear. And yet fear can be so consuming. And I think it's really hard.
Powerful physiological response, right?
It's probably the most powerful. I can say this: when I go into a room of people that are happy, if I'm feeling down, it takes a lot for me to feel happy. But I have gone into rooms where there's a ton of fear, and instantly I feel
it's because I guess it's because of our wiring, right? Because that fear response we need to keep us alive.
Yes,
we don't need happiness. We don't need to be happiness.
Amygdala and limbic system. It protects us,
or do we?
But sometimes it protects us too much.
We can just survive in misery without happiness, right? I mean, some people die of a broken heart.
I think that it depends on our perspective, because I think oftentimes we turn that misery into our new norm of happy. Like we try to make it comfortable, right? I think we need to have happiness or comfort or meaning in our life to some degree. And that's where fear
100%.
becomes and control becomes so real to us, is because our mind has warped that into being comfort, meaning, or happiness, but it's not. It warps it into becoming the answer. It becomes the defense mechanism instead of the coping mechanism. That's what I think happens. I think we can only go so long in that before we have to have defense mechanisms. Like we have to
Well, it points up
survive.
how much it's programmed in our psychology of security. You know? I remember early on,
we're designed to survive, right? I mean, we will do everything to survive.
Yeah. Early on in my training, I remember being like, it's all about feeling secure. It's all about feeling safe.
Yes.
You know, being able to be spontaneous, yourself, create, achieve, you know, is kind of built on this expectation or hope or belief that there is security. And I know, like, in my life where I'm at now as a 46-year-old guy, you know, with 6 kids and been married over 20 something years, you know, and have the responsibilities I do at work or in my church community and stuff. And it's like, I'm able to do these things with the expectation or hope of some sense of success or for it to go well. But that's really so wired to that I have secure attachment in my marriage relationship. I mean, I would say that that's my most secure relationship. You know, I also have other good friends and good other, you know, people and a church community that I have a sense of security in and all of that. But like the foundation of all of that is that I have a marriage relationship that I feel securely attached, which then allows me to have the ability to take greater risks or push back or challenge things or experiment with things, where if I didn't have that base, I don't know if I would, because I probably would be looking for those environments to provide that sense of security.
Sure.
Where I don't look.
Well, think about
I look
the times
to be successful at work, but I don't look to my job to provide a sense of security.
Well, and think about those times when we don't have. So you can be securely attached in your relationship. Just, I'm speaking to those who are listening. You can be securely attached in your relationship. That doesn't mean you're securely attached all the time. It doesn't mean it's 100%. And so think about even in those moments when you're not, and what comes, right? What happens with us?
Well,
that answers that question you just asked right there.
And that's a part of the emotional maturity too, is to have a felt sense of connection in the marriage, that I can even challenge the marriage, so that if we have a moment that feels a little disconnecting, I still have internalized this idea that, we're having distress up here, but we have this base foundation connecting that supersedes this disagreement about whatever, money or finances or kids or clothes or what we're doing today or whatever it might be, that we, you know, push and pull. You know, it's really interesting. And definitely something that I've, you know, been able to see and test that's true, you know, over.
But even in
years
that,
as a therapist,
it's not something that comes naturally to us, right? And so, and that's the important thing, I think, for people to understand. Even in healthy relationships, there's gonna be moments of stress and of distortion and of insecurity. It's inevitable. That's part of you know, really, especially
if you're a progressing person, and you do have,
honestly, we're all progressing at some pace, right? Maybe it's different than others, but and so there, as a progressing, it's going to happen, right? There's going to be those moments.
As a progressing person, if you have some sense of felt security, and you, which we all do have, some distorted sense of the order of the world, and then you have a paradigm shifting moment where you realize the way that you see things isn't the way that it is. That's where you start to have that existential distress
and I
of
think
like,
that's
well, what is this world that I live in when this secure
and I
foundation
think
and the way
that's
that I
what
look
you
isn't.
kind of see start to happen with Hammond, right? Maybe starting with the
Yes.
ice cream scene, working into the rest where he becomes more fearful. And then finally he looks humbled by the end, right? Kind of just like, well, let's save who we can save, really. And at the very end scene, before he gets in the helicopter, he's kind of just standing there staring. And I'm like, what are you doing? Get out of there. Like, what are you looking at? Like, look at it from the
Well, it's
helicopter. But
right. It's that
he's
shock of
having,
loss.
yeah.
He's having that existential, like what I tried to put together has
Shock's a
just
great
fallen
word.
apart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fallen apart, right? It's falling apart right in front
Yes.
of me. And here I am abandoning it. I'm surrendering it.
Yes. It's a
And so,
loss. And
oh,
it's probably
yeah.
like losing a family member for him
Oh, yeah.
in how much he's invested into that emotionally.
Well, based on the
Physically,
ice cream scene, it is. It's
yeah.
like this whole identity, right?
Yeah.
Which is
Great.
oh,
Go ahead.
yeah, which is interesting part of thinking about who you are, what's important to you, what you're organized around, and cultivating the security within your relationship with yourself and others so that you are dynamic enough to be able to see where you could be off.
Which is a constant, I think sometimes we think in life, I find even I and my clients think of, I'm going to get to that point. And I think that we have to kind of reframe that to, it's a constant process.
Right.
We're going to always have ups and downs. Yeah. And I think we oftentimes think, well, I can get to a point where there's no downs. And I think we have to really reframe and understand, hey, there's always ups and downs, but maybe the downs can look different over time. Right. And I think
they
that's
won't debilitate me, or they won't destroy me. They won't end me,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a journey for sure. And Jurassic Park does a great job of outlining the tension between chaos and order and power and control.
Such a good movie.
And I think AI is the dinosaurs, people. I'm just putting that out there.
Oh, man.
It's a metaphor.
Skynet is coming.
Of the consequence of creating a new sentient thing.
I want the T2 version of Arnie, not the T1.
Oh my gosh!
If we have the T1, that's gonna.
I remember. We should go back and do that, because I remember just being horrified, because it's just this unstoppable, unrelenting force that's going to destroy you,
Arnie.
Which is the vibe you get in the second one too, with Gobbly Man, Goo Man.
Yes.
I mean, he's just unrelenting.
Quicksilver, whatever you want to call him.
The surfer. What is that? From the Fantastic Four movies. Yeah, he's just this unrelenting force, and he's going to put his little knife finger pointy metal thing through your eyeball.
Yes.
And stop your brain from working. It's going to take care of that fear problem you have with your amygdala.
Yep, that'll take care of it. You won't feel much after that. Not to be too
well
morbid.
On that warm and fuzzy note, hope you've enjoyed another hour with the
everyone.
Red Head Therapy Game.
It was a fun one. Adios, amigos.
See ya.